I think that you should listen to me just for this short while, because I really think I have a very important story to tell. But very important for us, and if I can get this to work, maybe I can. Yes. We won't tell you what to eat, to drink, or to wear, but what we would like to tell you is our side of the story, because I'm sure that you are aware that much of the story about food production and agriculture nowadays are told by other people than the people working in this sector. And to be honest, the agricultural sector have done a really, really lousy job when it comes to communication. I was born in 1965. That's quite a long time ago, I know, but back then when I was a kid, everybody had a connection to agriculture. Everybody had a grandfather or an aunt or an uncle or a good friend who had a father who was a farmer, right? While I grew up, the number of farms in Europe declined tremendously, which meant that fewer and fewer people had a knowledge about what's going on at the farms. And at the same time, the farms were, of course, industrialized to be able to produce more, a bigger amount of livestock, a bigger amount of crops, but they didn't really tell about it. They kept, under the radar, so to speak. They didn't really tell the story about how this industrialization was done, and that it was done with a focus on many good things like animal welfare, like environmental protection, and like food safety. So now we really have a lack of communication. We need to fill out this gap, and that's why, excuse me, that we in Brussels went together, 11 different associations, all with a connection to livestock production, tried to join and spread the word on how we from the sector side see the production, to try to spread the facts. It is very important for us to say that we won't tell you what to do, but we would like to present you with the facts so you can go home, or you are home now, so you can reflect on it and afterwards form your opinions on a more informed basis. So that was sort of the introduction to everything, I think. Okay. We actually owe a lot to animal protein. And why is that? Yes, because when our ancestors many, many years ago lived in Europe and Africa and other places, they used quite a lot of their energy on their digestion. When they started to eat animal protein, and actually there are archaeological findings that shows that 2.5 million years ago, there were slaughtering of animals already. And giving that high quality diet that animal protein actually is, helped the guts not to take so much energy. And then it was possible for the brain to improve and to get larger. So we owe a lot to animal protein. We are not thinking about that in our everyday life, I guess. Sorry. This slide, I have to thank Professor Dr. Frédéric Levrat from the Vrije Universiteit in Brussels a lot for sharing with me. It's his doing. It's something that is, when I saw his presentation the first time and then afterwards asked him if I could use this slide, I was actually quite surprised by it. And I think you're going to be as well. Because even today, hunters and gatherers, they are eating quite a lot of meat, from 80 to 500 kilo per capita per year. And that's really a lot. And actually, when you read scientific articles, you don't see that these people have any health issues that's different from the people in the Western world. In the West today, we are eating, there it says, around 50 kilos of red meat, plus 24 to 50 kilos of poultry meat. Actually, when you look at the numbers from the OECD and FAO, it's in US, they eat 96 kilos of meat per capita. That's both poultry and red meat. In Europe, we eat 65 kilos, and where 24 of them are poultry meat. And then there is what Professor Leroy calls the virtual reality. It's the reality that many voices are talking about today that we should go over to eat far, far less meat. And why is that? Why is it that everybody thinks that we should eat less meat? Some say it's because of health issues, some say it's because of the environment, and some says it's because of animal welfare. And I will try to touch upon these three topics in my presentation here. And I'm very, very curious and excited to hear your questions afterwards and to learn from your thoughts about meat and how the future of meat is going to be. So I'm looking very much forward to the discussion we're going to have afterwards. You see, meat is really a great source of protein. And that's why most doctors dealing with children and elderly people emphasize that it's important to have meat in your diet because you need the protein. There's also some vitamins and some minerals you don't get if you are not eating meat. If you're a vegetarian, you have to be sure that you are taking these vitamins and these minerals beside your everyday meals, so you're sure that you have all the different substances that you need to function. And when it comes to nutrition, and that we also in the Western world have a huge problem with obesity, and there it's good you can't see the rest of me because I'm actually one of them who have that problem. But then if we want to tackle that problem, maybe it's a good idea to eat meat if you need protein. Because here in this slide, you see on every plate, there is 28 grams of protein. So you can get 28 grams of protein by eating one chicken breast fillet, that will give you 140 kilocalories, or you can choose to eat 188 grams of hazelnut. That will give you 1,120 kilocalories. And this is not something that you think about every day, but I think it's a quite important information to have. And again, meat is a very important substance in the diet for children, but also for the elderly who needs easy digestible protein to maintain their functions. Now we go a little bit over to the environmental side. Because when you, like I do, work in Brussels, then you, and there's a lot going on in Brussels, as I'm sure you're aware, about making a new Green Deal and making a sustainable farm to fork policy. And we are all behind that. That's a really, really good idea. What we need to do when we make such policies is to look at the holistic view. And that's where we sometimes run into trouble. Because not everybody thinks about that. If you want to grow vegetables and crops, you actually need livestock, because the manure produced by livestock is fertilizing the soil, so you can grow the vegetables and the crops. Another very important thing is that only 30% of the crops are actually digestible for humans. So people who are saying that we should just all be vegetarians, then there would be food for all. It's actually not really true, because only 30% of what we grow is digestible for us. We can't, like the cows, go out on a grass field and get all our feed there. So we need livestock to take care of this conversion of the plant protein to get a balanced diet to humans. So circular agriculture is very, very important, and it's based on, as you can see, the principle of optimizing the use of biomass, where the waste streams of one supply chain can be raw materials for the next. So, and there we are in Europe very, very good at using this system. Meat has been the scapegoat, so to speak, when it comes to emissions. When we talk about emissions to the atmosphere and GHG emissions and so forth, then the picture we get in our heads are beef, mainly. That's at least my opinion. I would like to hear yours afterwards. We hear that meat is the big scapegoat here. Meat is really, really bad. But when you look at this figure, and this is not a figure I made, it's from FAO, agriculture and livestock is responsible for 10% of the allocation of the GHG emissions. It's not much. The energy sector is really the place where we are having trouble. Just an example. Some people have made this example that if you take a return flight from Brussels to Rome, one flight to Rome, one back again, then the emission that gives for one passenger is more than the same person's meat intake for a whole year if they eat the average amount of meat. I'm not saying that if you don't fly, then you can just eat all the meat you want. I'm not saying that you can just fly and then don't eat any meat. I'm just saying be aware of all these facts when you make your policies. That is really, really important. Since the last 30 years, we have really done a huge job in Europe to try to get down the emissions from agriculture. And that's been done by lots of innovations. We are using precision farming. We are using digitalization, all the things that are also a part of the new Green Deal. So we try to optimize even more. And that's, of course, something we need to work on with. We are not finished, not at all. But it's not because we are producing less that this has gone down. It's because we're in a smarter way. And I can show you that on this slide, because this is, again, data from FAO, where you can see how much emission there is of per million tons animal protein. And there, as you see, in Europe, we're doing quite a good job. You might ask, why is Russia below Europe? And the explanation for that is mainly that they are not producing that much beef in Russia, because when it comes to meat production, beef is the most heavy on climate damage, so to speak. But in Europe, we're doing a great job. So let's say that we find out we are not going to produce that much meat in Europe anymore because we think meat is bad for humans, meat is bad for the climate. The problem is the consumers does not feel that. There's just been released a new report which has been made from the consumers organizations in Brussels called Avec. And there it was quite evident that the consumers do not feel that their meat intake is a problem for the climate. So it's not likely that the European consumers will eat less meat. So if we produce less meat in Europe and the consumers will eat the same amount, then we will have to import meat from third countries where there is a higher impact on the climate of producing meat, which of course, because emissions does not know any borders. So then globally, we would have a huge problem when it comes to emissions. That's not a good idea. But then, of course, we are going, and I'm looking very, very much forward to hearing the presentation of Professor Post. Then maybe lab meat is a possibility. I don't know that much about lab meat, if any. So I'm really looking forward to get much wiser on that in the presentation which is going to come after this one. Animal welfare. Many people do not eat meat because they think that the animals are not living under decent circumstances. And there I can tell you that in Europe, we have legislation on animal welfare. That's not the case in many other parts of the world. we have had legislation for quite a while, and that legislation is based on scientific evidence made from EFSA in Parma. And I'm not saying that it's fine and we couldn't do more. Of course, we should always try to improve, but we have animal welfare legislation. And that actually is very visible on this chart. This is the Animal Protection Index, and it's been updated this year in 2020. And you can see the organization behind it at the right part of the screen. So it's animal welfare associations together with the OIE. And there you can see that Europe is actually doing quite fine when it comes to animal welfare. Again, I'm not saying that we are all good and that we just can keep on. We have jobs to do, that's for sure, but we are on the right path. Again, then, if we are not producing meat or livestock in Europe and we import it from third countries, you can do your own maths. Would that be better for the animal welfare? Maybe not. What would the world look like without livestock? We are going to hear a lot about lab meat later. That's going to be very, very interesting. But as far as I know, until now, it still demands quite a lot of different ingredients to grow lab meat. So it's still not, as far as I know, very sustainable. Maybe it's on its way. Let's see. When it comes to renewable energy and fertilizers and lots of other things, what should we do without livestock? Then we would have to use chemical fertilizers. And in the new Green Deal, the Commission has just launched the idea that we should decrease the use of chemical fertilizers with 20%. So we have to look at it in a holistic way. Behind every livestock farm, there's actually 7 jobs in rural areas. Now, I guess you all live in a big city like Groningen, but many of you maybe are originating from a village where your parents are still living and who would like to stay on living there. And there's less and less job in rural areas. And if we are declining the farming and the agricultural production, then we will lose jobs in rural areas. Just in the poultry sector, which I represent, we are having 370,000 jobs directly. Poultry is produced on 25,000 family farms around in Europe, and that's just poultry. Then we have beef, then we have milk, then we have pork, then we have crops, agriculture as a whole. So lots of things would happen if we are going down in the livestock production. And then in our everyday lives, many other products have a link with agriculture. I mean, please have a look down at your shoes, everybody. Are they made of leather? Because then livestock has been involved. Your medicines, if any of you have to take any medicines, probably there's some part that livestock has produced. What about wine? We all like a glass of wine, at least I know I do. And wine is also a part of the whole circle when it comes to circular agriculture. So there would be a lot of consequences if we are not producing livestock in Europe. So the most important thing for us right now, and there I'm talking about my generation, because it's my generation now who are the decision makers who are going to make the policies which will have a huge impact on your lives. So we need to do a good job. It's really important. We have to find a balance between having a sustainable production and to be able to produce food for maybe up to 10 billion people on the planet in 2050. And that's a delicate balance. And we simply need to use science to find out what to do. There's much of the debate right now which is based on emotions and not on science. And this is a little bit dangerous for the future, because if we base our arguments on emotions, then we might not get the best result in the end. Sustainable production, less water use, less energy use, less land use, less materials, less building space. I'm sure that you can all agree that that's the way we want to go. Then it can puzzle me a little bit that the Commission now have gone out and said that 25% of the agricultural land in Europe should be organic in 2030. Because at least the thing I know mostly about poultry production, if you want to produce an organic chicken, it takes much more water, it takes much more feed, and when it takes more feed, there's more land use and so forth. I'm not saying organic is bad, not at all. I would also buy an organic chicken now and then, but we just need to know the science behind so we make the right policies. Very important. And now, hopefully, a film will start. Hopefully. It started now on my computer. Hopefully, it will start on yours.
Today, it's easier to say what we don't want and what we don't like. It's easy to put forward an opinion and to hit the headlines with striking images. The problem is, we tend to forget all about the knock-on effects of those opinions. Today, the livestock sector is taking centre stage in Europe, with some even calling for a drastic reduction. However, a livestock exit would have severe consequences. An EU without livestock would not only lose a precious source of locally produced safe food, but also essential habitats and biodiversity. Such an EU would also face increased forest fires, serious lack of natural fertilisers, green energy and essential raw materials, while witnessing an increased rural exodus. We're convinced that European livestock farming model based on diversified local and family farm structures is the backbone of our rural areas. European livestock farms are and continue to adapt to contribute to the bioeconomy, to storing carbon while ensuring an affordable supply of nutritious food, as well as many other products needed for a healthy lifestyle. We won't tell you what to eat, drink or wear, but it's good to hear the two sides of the story before forming an opinion, because when you make a choice, you also choose all of its consequences. Meet the facts first.
I think it's a good idea to show you the world meat consumption forecast from OECD FAO. They make such an agricultural outlook every year. And this one is the newest one. It's from 2019. And as you can see, all the meat types are going up. And I'm proud to say that poultry is going by fastest. my pork colleagues does not really like this graph. I love it. No, that was not funny. Sorry. It goes up. And why does it go up? Because you all think that the meat consumption here in Europe is declining. It is declining for pork and beef, but it's not declining for poultry. It's still going a little bit up for poultry in Europe. But where the growth really is in the developing world. Because in Asia, Southeast Asia, in Africa, some countries, at least until the COVID crisis, they saw a growing economy, which meant that many families got more money in their hands, so they actually were able to buy meat to serve their children a very good meal. And the first meat species they can buy is poultry because it's the most affordable. And many, many people in the world are still suffering from food insecurity. Food insecurity has not been something we have been discussing in Europe in my lifetime, but here during the COVID crisis, we have actually started to talk about it because we've suddenly had the feeling that it is quite vulnerable, right? We could, if a major crisis occurs and all the farmers got ill, for instance, what would happen? Then we wouldn't have any food to put on our plates every day. So it is very important when we make policies that we take this into account. We need to produce food for people. The very first thing that happens if there's not food enough is that people start to want to make revolutions, and then the world can fall apart. That was a comment of my own, not of my company here. But it is very, very important. So to close off, is there a future for meat? And I guess it's not a surprise for you that I would say, yes, indeed there is. And I would encourage you very, very much to go into our common website, which of the European Livestock Voice. It's called meetthefacts.eu. Have I written com? Then it's wrong. It's meetthefacts.eu. That's really embarrassing. Meetthefacts.eu, where there is so much good information and facts behind what's going on in agriculture. So I encourage you to use this website, and I'm really looking forward to hearing all your questions. And thanks so much for giving us this possibility to speak to you today. Thank you.